We'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Sante. I work for the BIG EAST Conference and will be emceeing tonight's session. Tonight's webinar serves as the first session of the Career Discovery track of BIG EAST University, and we're excited for all of you to join us. Tonight's panel will focus on careers in advocacy and activism and will run for roughly 1 hour. Through the course of the webinar, you all will have the opportunity to ask questions via Zoom's Q&A function, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can. Moderating tonight's panel is the CEO of the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality, commonly referred to as RISE, Diane Billings-Buford. Diane has spent her career working in and lifting up diverse communities, and prior to joining the RISE team, Diane worked at Time Warner as Executive Director of Cultural Investments, Vice President of the Time Warner Foundation, and for former New York City Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg as the city's Chief Service Officer, where she headed NYC Service, a division of the mayor's office engaging more than 1.3 million New Yorkers in a range of volunteer activities. Our first panelist is Kevin Keenan. Kevin is the Vice President of Innovation and New Initiatives at the Vera Institute of Justice. In his role, Kevin helps lead Vera's efforts to transform the US justice system to be more equitable, reparative, and effective. Prior to Vera, Kevin served as Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel of the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund and Executive Director of the ACLU of San Diego. Our next panelist is Jessica Kelly. Jessica serves as Chief of Staff at Running Start, a nonpartisan nonprofit that trains young women to run for office. Jessica's passion for college women's leadership stems from her experience as a first-generation college student, wanting to make sure all college women have the tools to navigate leadership opportunities and make the most of their college experience. Prior to Running Start, Jessica was a program manager for the American Association of University Women's Campus Leadership Program and served as a program coordinator for George Washington University's LGBTQ Resource Center, and is also a UConn Husky. Shout out to the Huskies that are in the building tonight. Our final panelist is Arva Rice. Arva currently serves as president and CEO of the New York Urban League, helping lead the way underserved African Americans are educated, employed, and empowered across the 5 boroughs of New York City. Arva is a passionate community leader who has dedicated herself to creating pathways to success for young people with a focus on girls and women. Arva is also a 2013-14 Annie Casey Fellow, which is a national fellowship for government and nonprofit leaders focused on supporting innovation solutions for children. Now that you've met our panel, I will turn it over to Diane for the first question of the night.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Michael. I'm excited. I'm excited for this panel, guys. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm exhausted, but I'm actually excited for this conversation. I think I'm going to learn some things. Michael already was good enough to introduce us. I am admittedly one of the world's worst conference panel attendees ever in the history of the world. So I think it makes me a really great facilitator of them. My goal tonight is that we're going to have a conversation and we're really going to make it worth folks' time and worth our time. I hope we'll learn from one another this evening. So I'm going to jump right in. Right, we're all here because we are professionally involved in either advocacy or activism. I think those are 2 really large umbrellas. Michael kind of laid out what we do, what our titles are, and a few other titles we've held. But I'd like to start at, why did you take this road? And I think each of us, I usually find these roads, these choices and the motivations really unique. So I'd like to, let's go with Kevin. We'll let the man go first. This is the last time that'll happen tonight, Kevin. Embrace it.
Wow.
But why did you take this road? What made you say, I want to be involved in advocacy and activism?
Some of it I was lucky enough just to know as a kid, and particularly in high school, seeing injustice play out and getting really upset about it and saying that's not right. That's not what we pledged to be as a country. And I got involved early on with the ACLU on policing issues, knowing that people of color, Black folks in particular in Bridgeport, Connecticut, next to the town I grew up, Fairfield, Connecticut, were treated much differently. feeling and breathing the irrational white fear that people in Fairfield had about Bridgeport. All these things were in my environment. I was lucky enough to get connected with the ACLU and see you could do something about it. So that's, that just for those of you who've got it in your DNA and you're, have one particular transformative experience, trust that feeling, because it is ultimately super rewarding.
Sorry, thank you for being so open. Jess, what made you choose this road?
Yeah, so I always like to really hammer home the message that it's awesome when you have an experience like Kevin, where you're like, I figured this out when I was pretty young, and I found like what I really was passionate about. That was not my experience at all. And I think for anybody who's feeling like, I have all these things I'm interested in, but I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until maybe like 5 years ago. So that I think it's okay to just think about what's the next thing. So, if an opportunity comes your way, figure out what you like about it, and then see where that aspect of it can take you next. Because that's kind of what happened for me. My journey definitely started at UConn. If there are any Huskies in the room, give me a hello in the chat. But I just happened to take a women's studies course, my very first, actually, I think it was the very first course I took, and did have a little bit of that like mind-blowing experience of just some things I never realized. And then from there, explored women's studies at UConn, and then again at Southern Connecticut State University. And just each time I learned something new, it kind of took me in a new direction. So my current role, I had started working in like program managing different leadership programs for women. And how I became chief of staff was really, I realized that I liked the aspects of my job that involved like supervising interns and helping the whole organization sort of have that 100-foot view of what we're all doing and help us communicate better, and was able to sort of step up and say, hey, I think we need to be doing this, this, and this, and I'll do it. And was able to sort of make a role for myself there, because we're in a pretty small organization. So sometimes it's just, taking advantage of every opportunity where you are to learn everything you can, and then follow the things that interest you.
Sorry, that's so often the case, right? It's not these huge aha moments, but it's moment by moment as we go through. Arva, what made you make this choice? What made you choose this road?
I feel like in some ways that the road was chosen for me. I was raised the child of two people who moved from rural Arkansas to first to Chicago and then to Milwaukee to make a better way for their kids. And they literally picked cotton in Arkansas and didn't want, for them, they had no idea that there would be anything other than that option. So they're like, we don't want our kids growing up picking cotton. So we're going to move north, and we're going to provide them with an opportunity to go to college. And my mother always said that to whom much is given, much is required. And so because she thought that her and my dad worked and sacrificed so hard to make sure that all their kids completed high school and went to college, that we had a requirement. And that requirement was to give back in the biggest ways that we possibly could. And so my parents were part of that Great Migration. And so now I lead an organization that was founded because of the Great Migration. And so I feel like this road was in some ways almost predetermined for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm probably a mix between all of you. To your point, Kevin, when I was fairly young, I went through a program, Prep for Prep. And for me, it was on the other side of that. I was joking with someone the other day. I didn't even realize I didn't grow up with much until I got into private school and realized, oh, we don't have any money. They have money. And, but I began to see, to your point, right, these two different worlds. And I think the seed was planted then, but to Arva's point, maybe it was planted before. One of my many jobs a while ago was opening charter schools. And I would tell folks, I wanted to push for families in urban areas to have choice. You know, to me, education equals freedom. Everybody would say that, but it's real, right? My grandma was a maid, and she wasn't a maid because she loved to clean. She was a maid because she was from the rural South and she had a 7th grade education. And for me, my education means I get to choose what I do. I get to choose how I earn a living, and that is freedom. You know, that is a type of freedom. So I thank you all for sharing that. I want to get a little bit more nitty gritty. Michael mentioned our titles. Jess, you shared a little bit already about the things you like to do in your job, but I think it would be good to talk to folks tonight a little bit about our roles and what our day-to-day looks like. And let me just preface, I think it's important because I'm hoping that we will educate folks on what advocacy and activism truly looks like in the workplace. So Jess, why don't we start this time with you? And I know you shared a little bit already about what you do day to day.
Yeah, so if working sort of in the nonprofit space is an interest for you, I think it's worth noting that there's a lot of diversity of what the experience looks like. It's a huge, you know, there's a lot of organizations just within that umbrella. For my personal experience, I've been with Running Start for the past 5 years or so, and we are, like we said at the beginning, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit that trains young women to run for office. So we do a variety of leadership programs for high schoolers, college students, and young professionals, all preparing young women with connections, with skills, and with the confidence to run for office, whether it's right where they are on campus or down the line. And we, thank you, Arva. Nice note in the comment. I started as a program director. So that literally meant I just, and I still do some of that work now because we're a small team. And when you're in a small nonprofit, sort of people have multiple roles. I'm sure a lot of folks on the call probably have that experience too. So what I do now is I manage one of our programs, which is our congressional fellowship, where we take college women who are seniors or recent graduates, and we place them in internships on Capitol Hill with women members of Congress. And every Friday we do leadership trainings with them. So I'm spending every Friday with a group of women, and we are practicing things like your elevator speech, what issues you care about, practicing advocating for them, but also practicing things like networking, financial literacy. You know, leadership is also a really big umbrella. So that's like the really fun part of my job, is that program piece, because I get to, you know, have really close relationships with young women who have a lot of, you know, they're ambitious and they want to make change in their communities. And so it's really rewarding to be able to be a part of that journey with them. But the other hat that I wear is chief of staff. So that means that I am meeting with the 11 members of our staff every week to check in on what they're working on, make sure that they have everything they need to do their jobs well, and make sure that what everybody's working on is coordinated in some way. So making sure we're all communicating with each other. Literally today I was like mapping out our calendar for the entire year so that everybody knows when are the busy times, when are the slow times. So there's that sort of work too that, you know, goes into running an organization.
Yeah, the unsexy stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It's gotta happen.
Mm-hmm. My colleague and I say, if people knew how much our job was just spreadsheets, they would not be as jealous of our jobs.
Right, right. No, they still would be jealous. It's still a great job. It's a great organization. Arva, your day-to-day?
My day-to-day is really varied, and that's what I love about it. So the Urban League, as I mentioned, was turning 101 years old, long-term civil rights organization that works with education, employment, housing, and healthcare. And the Urban League that I run here in New York City works in education, employment, and advocacy. I'm the second woman to have this role, and it's 101-year history. So that in and of itself is its own set of adventures. And what's interesting about it is I deal with the grassroots as well as the grass tops. So we deliver direct programming, sending young people to college, help to support them in getting college scholarships, finding out about careers in STEM, getting people employment opportunities. So that's the direct work that my staff does and we're involved in doing, but it's also this advocacy component. So, you know, I can have a day where I'm, you know, in conversation with, you know, the commissioner of the NYPD looking at issues around police advocacy, but then also, you know, in conversation with somebody who's dealing with, you know, homelessness issues. So it's the variety of my position that I think is most interesting and keeps me involved and engaged. I'm a Pisces, so I, you know, once the project is over, I usually lose interest, but
truth telling.
But this keeps me involved and engaged, always working towards the overall goal of the Urban League, which is to empower communities and change lives.
I love it. I love it. Kevin?
It's so great to hear from you, and big fan of each of your organizations. We work a little bit with RISE. The Vera Institute is a national organization seeking to transform justice systems to be more reparative, less racist. And we do that through research and partnering with both government and community. We've been around since 1961. We have about 280 staff. And I've gotten to play lots of different roles. As of this summer, we finished a strategic plan and we're doubling down on our model of creating ideas and scaling them to have a national impact. And I've been put in charge of developing the machinery internally that supports fellow staff members in coming up with ideas and then puts in place ways to help them take that out, pilot in the field, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, making sure it's addressing race equity. And those ones that continue to succeed, we're going to invest in to take to the national level. So that's kind of exciting. We've had some victories on that in the past. Just in December, we got a federal bill passed to repeal a ban on Pell Grants being used for people in prison. Yeah. It's a huge deal. It was the makings of lots of lots of partner organizations. Thank you to all our Vera's partners who were key to this, right? And really was a 10-year effort that just culminated. So we're looking to do that type of thing, but bigger and faster. And so this machinery that I'm helping to build now is really key to that. So my meetings today, just looking at my calendar, like real talk, was the hard work of figuring out even what is the first application look like when you ask someone, what's an idea to transform the justice system? Do you want it to be really easy so they're not intimidated and they get their idea out there and then we follow up with them? Or should we be real with them and say, actually, we're gonna need to know all this stuff, so tell us up front. And me and my colleague, Chelsea is a Georgetown grad, figured out that we should check with other people who've submitted applications before and reviewed applications before. So we called a meeting for next week to sort of have a focus group and say, give them some options and talk through our goals and say, what as a user on either end would you want and need? It's fun. It's great to construct and build something and know that it's going towards this mission of coming up with the next transformative idea and project.
That's amazing. I love to, again, this diversity of what we do. We're all fairly senior, so I feel like we've definitely got some strategic work in there. I love, though, that Jess, you have some direct service, which is really important. That becomes, I think it's worth, and we may talk about this later, I think it's worth saying that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. If that's what folks are really passionate about, even if you stay in this field, you can become more senior and become, you know, I remember making the decision to be less connected to the direct service. And it's a significant, you know, career decision. And we can talk about that in a bit. How many of you, maybe just show of hands, who has to raise money? Your day-to-day is raising money. So it's worth, thank you guys, it's worth us sharing.
I'm the lucky one then.
Right. It's worth us sharing, right? That is also usual. If you're going to be in this space, your day-to-day somehow is connected to raising funds, unless you're Jess. There you go. That's the key. Be Jess. as we are, I thank you guys for sharing your day to day, how you got here. I want us to think about our audience, because I love these panels because it makes me think back quite a little while. I won't even tell you which reunion I just went to, but is there something you would tell yourself from where you're sitting now as you think about sitting in this seat being in college? And I love that we have Kevin, who always knew, Jess, who it seems like a course in college really put you on this road. Arva, you were literally raised for this. But is there advice now that you would give your college self from this place of advocacy and activism? Arva?
Yes, I definitely have some things I would have told young Arva. And that is, I would have encouraged myself to do more things that made my stomach hurt. And I think that that's when you're really truly being courageous and when you're really putting yourself in growth moments. I went to the best school that I could, but I needed to make sure that was within an hour and a half of my mom. So I went to Northwestern growing up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was a great choice for me. It was a great school, great education. But, you know, I could have gone any place I wanted to, but I, you know, wanted to stay close to home and didn't do any travel abroad. And so I would encourage people to spread their wings as much as they can when they're young. And then the second thing that I would encourage folks is that the only people that are not making mistakes are people that aren't doing anything. So give yourself some grace. Understand as a young person, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to mess up, you're going to fall down, and it's all fine. It's all good. We all do it. It's just, you know, some people do it with more grace or less grace or something in between. But to take those risks and to definitely forgive yourself for some of the mistakes you'll make along the way.
Jess?
I 100% back up everything Arva just said. I usually say that one of my biggest regrets in college was that I didn't even consider studying abroad, and now I'm really kicking myself from missing out on that because it's just a huge growth opportunity to get just totally outside of your comfort zone. And I think there are smaller ways to do that too. And I wish, you know, when we read my bio at the beginning, it said I'm a first generation college student. So neither of my parents really had much advice for me beyond, like, you know,
Go to class.
Try to get good grades and hopefully you'll make some friends. And had I known how much I would grow and how much my experience would open up if I had gotten more involved, I would have done that a lot differently. And get involved with different, like, I have these memories of missed opportunities. Like, you don't have to, getting involved doesn't mean you have to give so much of your time. It could just be trying different things. Like, I have a memory of walking by an event put on by the South Asian student organization in the student center at UConn and being really interested and wanting to stay and talk, but none of my friends were interested. So I just kind of went with them and walked by, and I'm thinking, why did I do that? Why didn't I pursue the thing that seemed interesting to me? And there were lots of moments like that if I could go back, I would do it over differently.
Wow, thank you for that. Kevin?
Yeah, it's a consistent theme here. If you were all second year law students, I would have a much more specific set of advice to you. And so, you know, to sort of forecast that, I would tell you to have 3 stories about who you are and what you were put on this earth to do. Tell that story and then back it up with bullet points of experience or things you've written, things you've done that show that, you know, you're the candidate for that job. And I like that model for a lot of reasons. You have a lot of different substantive interests. You have different things you're good at, and none of us are just one thing. So it honors that. It also means you have a better chance of getting different kinds of jobs when suddenly you have to move somewhere because of your significant other, whatnot. But that's all premised on you knowing what those things are. And you're in the moment where you have to figure that out. You have to try as many things as possible. So that's where I couldn't agree more. And it doesn't have to be, you know, you take a full internship or You know, you spend your whole semester working on something. Even 3 days experiencing something can be a really sort of good point, and maybe not enough to determine like what your life path should be or anything, but it's very important to have all those different experiences of both the issues and the kinds of work, so that you can find not one path for you. There isn't one path, but there's, you know, at least 3 paths for you in life, and that'll change. You want to collect towards figuring that out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. And thank you, Arpa, for giving me that heads up. You know, I would, you know, I have been living by this saying probably for about the past, it's almost a decade now, but I wish I had known to make decisions out of purpose and not fear. And one of the things I shared with people is that for thinking folks, we can make fear sound like it being intelligent, but really we are rationalizing our fear instead of making decisions out of our purpose. And so as I got older, I definitely began to make more decisions out of purpose instead of fear. And it could be the fear of, you know, we've talked about our backgrounds. It can be the fear of, I don't want to be poor, so I have to make certain career decisions and I have to make certain career choices. It could be the fear of, I don't want to be different and I want to build a life that are like the people I know. But you know, I definitely wish I had known to make my decisions out of purpose and not fear, maybe even a little earlier. But, you know, I still ended up at Rise, which is a great place to be. So it works out. I've got a great career. And that's the other thing I would tell folks, just stop, don't stress it. Like I wish, you know, to your point, Kevin, about the different paths. I spent so much time and probably more energy worried about like, was I making the right step? There is really a singular right step, right? And I wish I had just known like, there are a bunch of different right steps you can make. They're all going to lead to a great path. Just get at it. And so I hope all of you just kind of breathe in, breathe out. It must be a challenge during COVID to be figuring this out on top of everything else. I want to share, there's a question, there are 2 now, but I wanted to share the first question in the Q&A. I thank folks for sharing it. The first says, as a 30-something-year-old MBA, go Huskies. Okay, I'm not going to say I went to Yale, but I just about had it with these UConn folks for a minute. But go Huskies, student, my desire to join a company, my desire is to join a company that is looking to grow internally and truly have an inward eye at their corporate social responsibility. What advice would you give for breaking through in this field? What do you wish you would have known when you started? So any thoughts on someone interested in CSR? How do you break through in CSR? And what do we wish we had known? I have an answer for that. So I'll open it up. Who wants to go first?
No, Diane, I think you should go first because you have done an amazing job in crossing over from government to working for a corporation and then going and working for a nonprofit. So I think you should take it.
Thanks, Arva. So as you guys can tell, Arva and I know each other. But so my position at Time Warner was technically executive director of cultural investments, but really I led CSR when it was Time Warner, which is now Warner Media, and that was the holding company for HBO, Turner, and Warner Brothers. And interestingly enough, I'm going to say that most of the people that I interacted with in CSR came from the corporate world. And they actually, to the point of the question, they were at a company and they moved from one department in the company into CSR. I was a little bit of an outlier. I came and took that job after I had led a government agency for Mayor Bloomberg in New York. But I had also had some significant roles in the not-for-profit space. I was also a corporate attorney. So I think that what I would say for breaking into CSR is there are a number of ways in, but I do think there are 2 main roads. One is you're inside of a company that you believe in. you're networking, you're making connections, and you make a transition from one department into CSR, or the other is to become a bit of a content expert, and then start looking for more mid-level to senior positions in CSR in the company, knowing that what you're bringing to the corporation is a knowledge about the areas that they're seeking to support. So you kind of bring expertise to the company. Anyone else on suggestions for getting into CSR?
My work has been fully in the nonprofit sector, so I've actually never worked for a corporation. But a number of my colleagues in this space, the people that run other urban leagues, when they do go into working for corporations, working in philanthropy, they sometimes end up going to work for their biggest donor. So individuals that they have who've always sponsored their dinners, who've always supported their organization, who've hired people that they've trained, they just develop a natural kind of interaction with them, and it becomes a natural for them to go and work at the organization. So I've seen people make the transition from nonprofit to the corporate space, but it's usually through one of their biggest partners.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I would just say in general, and I'm almost regret saying this, but it ends up being, let's say a great opportunity where you intern. And it might be that it doesn't turn around into a job opportunity years later. But if you spend even, your spring semester this coming spring in CSR, and you stay in touch with those folks, that keeps that door open in interesting ways. And I had a one-year fellowship with the Vera Institute when I left law school. Never thought I'd be coming back into a leadership team role, and 15 years later, that was the case. So those things, even if they don't reap immediate rewards, often they do. Those kind of opportunities that you can squeeze in. And another little tip on that, I'm sure you all know, is much harder to get the summer internships than the fall or spring ones. And there's some tactics there because usually organizations aren't set up to handle fall and spring. So that's both a challenge and an opportunity. You're not competing against everyone. If you find someone who you can connect with there, you can usually get an internship without the same competition.
I love that. Let's stay on that topic, guys. I usually love asking this question. Kevin has shared an important internship that obviously impacted his career. What about Jess, Arva? Can you think back to one internship that really is super important to the rest of the road, even if it didn't seem like it at the time?
I have an example of one where it put me in the direction I am, partially because of what I didn't like about it. I interned for a local newspaper one summer, and it was one of the most crystal clear experiences of I really liked this. I really liked the writing. I really liked learning. I think it was really beneficial to learn the style of writing that wasn't academic, because that's really helpful when you get into the working world. The more concise you can be, the better, as opposed to, I got to write this thing that's 12 pages, so let me use all my SAT words. So getting that experience of writing really concisely was great, but I hated the going out, and I felt like I was intruding on people's lives, trying to get them to answer. So I learned a lot about what I liked and didn't like. And then I took the pieces about writing with me when I went to the next thing.
Absolutely. Arva?
I think a big pivotal internship for me was also in college. I believe it was between my sophomore and my junior year. And I did an internship at the Milwaukee District Attorney's Office. And I was just absolutely dying to be an attorney. I had been told that, you talk a lot, so you should go to law school, ever since I was in 7th or 8th grade. So I was just, really wanting to become an attorney and wanted to particularly work in the district attorney's office. And so being there, and I couldn't do it was between my sophomore and junior years of college. But, so clearly I couldn't do a whole lot, but they did have me do a little bit of research and just finding out how young the young people were that were being prosecuted. And you had a 12-year-old who started out with 11 and 10, started doing crazy stuff, and I was just like, this is a lot. And if I really want to make a difference in the lives of children, maybe I want to start on the other side and do more preventive work, providing positive alternatives to young people. So it kind of set me up for running a number of youth programs that I did after college.
It's so interesting. Thank you for that. It's so interesting you say that. In my first year of law school, I lucked out and I got this internship at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. I mean, it's a great internship. But it was in that summer when I was sitting at a couple of sentencings, I just had a moment I was like, I cannot do this. Like, I cannot spend my energy this way. And I so respected the people who did. I didn't think anything was wrong with it, but the internship illuminated for me, like, girl, you weren't built for this. And so internships can give such great lessons to make folks laugh. Just like you, another internship that it showed me where I didn't want to be, at least not at that point in my life, but I was really blessed enough and I got to be a White House intern. And I mean, come on, as a White House intern, my mother, my whole family, they were just so happy. And I was happy to be there. But all I wanted to do was get back to New York. I was working at a camp for kids and I was like, I just want this first session to end so I can go back to teaching, and it was this moment of knowing, what you're not interested in at the time. I might be more interested in that world now, but I wasn't then. So thank you guys for sharing that. And I think it segues into, we have a question.
Who president it was?
Oh yeah, it was Clinton and I was working, and I'm going to leave it right there. So it was 93. So anyway, might be
nothing to see here. Moving right along.
Nothing. It was quite the time in American history. This might be a great segue. We have a question in the Q&A that says, where would you recommend starting for a recent graduate interested in pursuing a career in advocacy or activism? And it might be what you just talked about. You could feel free to say you've covered it, but I think that's a great question. Who's up? Kevin, it's your turn again. I know you. I said you would never go first again, but see how nice I am?
But you're in charge. That's the point.
Amen.
There you go. Look, it's kind of a hard question to answer. I almost want to say, grab whatever you can, and then just be conscientious about how you're exploring from within that role. I remember, this may not be as true now, but when I was a young staffer at the ACLU, it was a real pain that right out of college, you'd get an admin assistant job at the ACLU and no one took you seriously. No one gave you more interesting things to do. They always said, oh, when you finish all your regular responsibilities, you can work on, something substantive. And there never was, a time when you were done with your regular responsibilities. So you got really stuck really quick. And a lot of folks, spent 2 years there and then went to grad school or law school or whatnot. It's not a terrible thing to do. Brennan Center actually takes a model where you have a 2-year fellowship and grabs graduating college students, and they do sort of administrative stuff, but they also have sort of a track more like a full-blown internship. So they're exploring and learning more about the issues in the organization. I love that model. If the organization you're at doesn't have that for you, you should make yourself a little dream board or 2-year calendar or something like that to use the position you're in as a point of exploration. Imagine it like day trips or whatnot into other aspects of advocacy and activism. And whenever there's a chance to, go to the rally that your organization's sponsoring or do the research for someone senior to write a letter or whatever, grab that. Obviously, taking care of yourself and all the craziness going on, you got to practice self-care too, but as much as possible, take whatever you get and make a ton out of it.
Yeah, I think I always tell folks, and this is a very old school piece of advice, but go do your job. Like I think I agree with you, Kevin. Get what you can get when you're coming out. Again, if anybody's coming out now, I do think there are certain advantages and there are certain challenges to coming out of school now. Um, but whatever you land, kill it, right? Like I always loved, there was a partner at Simpson who was so honest with me. He was like, Diane, you're first year. Your value is just sweat. It's just time. It's just like you're not bringing expertise to the table, right? Like what you're bringing is get in here and work, and then the other stuff can develop. I love that advice because it gave me the opportunity to learn what I liked and what I didn't like and where I excelled and where I didn't excel. So, my advice would be land what you can and just get in there and kill it. Um, Arva,
No,
coming
you,
right out, what do you suggest folks do?
yeah, I think Diane and Kevin, you nailed nailed it on the head with that one. I think that there's also an opportunity that no matter where you land, obviously, do it well. Particularly as people of color and women, they're going to look at us anyway, so we may as well give them a show. So I think that that's really important, and that also no matter whether you get the dream position that you want, you still have other hours in the day, so you can do it won't truly fully be an internship, but you can have a volunteer opportunity. You can join young professional groups, young professional networks that various organizations have put together. I know the Urban League has it, the NAACP has it. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure ACLU has a young professionals division, and just you all work with young professionals all the time. So I just think that there's an opportunity to work in your dream job, or to build your way towards it along the way.
Jess, you can add here, or I can ask you another question from another Husky that is in our Q&A. Let me know.
I want to reiterate something, Diane, that you said even another question ago that I think is so important. It kind of mirrors what you and Kevin both said of, you get that first job, and even if it's not the dream job, make the most of it, meaning figure out what of that really lights you up, and then pursue that aspect of it, learn more about it, ask people who are, if it's communications, if it's the direct service, if it could be anything. Like for me, it was, I realized I like managing people. Then learn more about that aspect of it. And I think it's so important to trust that feeling of what just leaves you drained at the end of the day versus what really lights you up. Because if you pursue the stuff that lights you up, you're going to be so much better off than just doing the thing you think you're supposed to do, but that just leaves you with all of your energy depleted at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let me get to this next Husky question. I'm a third-year graduate student at UConn. It's okay. You don't have to apologize to me, Lana. In the psychology PhD program, I'm extremely passionate about social and political activism and want to get involved in a career path similar to Jess. For nonprofits, is there a need for psychology experts or research specialists? And can I get involved concurrently with my studies at UConn? Thanks.
Mm.
Who's going first? Because I know I got to answer.
I'm sure I bet Arva has a good answer too. I will just say that yes, those opportunities are out there, and I'll share, like we got some grant money to do a big monitoring and evaluation project of researching the impact of our alums 5, 10, 15 years later, and we hired a local graduate student to help us do that, and now she's just transitioned to be a full-time staff member. So those kind of opportunities are out there. And sometimes I know that universities even have programs that connect graduate students who need a research project with nonprofits. We've done that with Georgetown University graduate students before. So that's another way that I've seen that happen.
Absolutely. I've taught capstone courses. And so I think there are tons of not-for-profits that would probably love your assistance. All of us are under the gun to provide evaluation. Some already have evaluators in place and lucrative contracts and they're set. But there are so many nonprofits who we need to be evaluated. We need to be able to measure our impact, to raise money, to make programmatic decisions. And so your skill set is very valuable. I mean, I wouldn't be a very good CEO if I didn't tell you Rise's internships are going live, and we're going to be looking for a data person soon too. So, and I say that to everyone, check us out at risetowin.org and apply away for the internships, and a data role is coming out as well. Anyone else on thoughts on a PhD psychology expertise?
I definitely think it's valuable. We just released our State of Black New York report at the Urban League, which was put together by researchers who we were looking for data points that talked about inequality. People were moved by what happened this summer, but we wanted to be able to say this isn't just Jamal's experience or Keisha's experience. This is something that we can talk about in aggregate. By looking at the experiences of individuals in the criminal justice system. And we couldn't do that without the work of researchers. And in my role trying to raise money every day, I feel like I'm trying to figure out people's motives for giving. So I always feel like I'm sort of a little bit of a psychologist. So I think that those skills are absolutely applicable in the nonprofit space.
Yeah. I mean, I will also say I don't have obviously a graduate degree in psych, but that was my undergrad. I think those skill sets and that knowledge is always valuable. Next question. Do you have advice for me to start connecting with people in other cities, i.e. New York City, Hartford, etc.? I'm also interested in learning about social justice opportunities in cities other than Milwaukee. So I'm assuming this person is in Milwaukee.
Wonderful.
I feel like all the world, one thing COVID has done is taken our connectivity to the next level. Right? At least right now, a lot of my staff is not in the same state. All of our interns last summer had to be remote all summer long, so they were able to be different places. And so I think now is a great time. Most of the jobs you see posted, folks are open to people coming from different places. Any other thoughts though on how to connect?
Yeah, I want to make a pitch. I'm a huge fan of the informational interview. The informational interview is a thing of beauty. So we're using the same terms. This is an interview that is not attached to a current job opening, usually. And it might not even be with someone you want to work with at the organization, but it's someone you can connect with. You reach out on LinkedIn, through the website, or you know someone who knows anyone at an organization, and you say, I'd love 30 minutes of your time to learn more about your work, your path, what the organization's thinking about doing next, as I try to figure out my own path. In informational interviews I always end up, enamored of the person I met with and happy to introduce them to anyone I know at any other organization. And that includes in other cities, right? So there is an art to doing it well. You have to be kind of very professional, and you have to follow up, both immediately with a thank you, and I would say 3 months, 6 months, some other period of time. Probably some better tips on the internet about how to do an informational interview well. But if I were beginning again, I would be doing all informational interviews all the time.
And a good way to find people is if, I would start with your alumni, group of your organization, because not to keep talking about UConn, but I'm sure every school, I know UConn has a big alumni presence in most major cities, and most schools do. And that's, if you have that's all you need really, is a connection to say hey, I'm also a Husky and I'm interested in I've done that with UConn students, and it's exciting to feel like you're giving back to your community in that way. And it doesn't have to be college. Alumni associations, it could be lots of different things. Like if there's an organization that you volunteer for, there's a lot of different communities you can pursue to be a part of that would have those kind of networking opportunities.
Yeah, I want to thank both of you because in doing and bringing up those two things, right? Sometimes these are soft skills and it's normative behavior, but if you don't know about it, you're on the outside of it, right? And so I think it's really important to bring those things up and send the message home that these are literally really welcomed and perfectly fine activities to engage in. It is absolutely fine to reach out to a bunch of people for informational interviews. Don't take it personally. Like, worst case scenario, they don't get back to you. No one's upset with you if you reach out for these informationals. So go ahead and do it. It is a part of how this work gets done. Networks are created. And so I thank both of you for sharing those things and leverage your alumni networks, leverage where you volunteer. All of this is expected. These are things that folks that know it are doing. And so it's so important that, it's shared far and wide. We have one more question. I'm just mindful of time. We've got a little bit of time, but I want to get to the question that's here. And then I have one wrap up question for folks. I'm a graduate student looking to switch careers. Currently, I'm a teacher, but I want to move more towards advocacy and not-for-profit work. In some ways, it feels like a natural transition. In other ways, it feels as if I don't have the experience for the nonprofit sector. What are some pathways that I should consider?
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of natural pathway just because education is such a huge issue for our communities. And so I think as a teacher, having that classroom experience, you can step into advocacy and be able to speak powerfully and well. I think there's a lot of transitions though that you can make. I know that the New York Urban League has an educational policy committee that's made up primarily of educators. And so we talked to them about policy, and they were able to meet a person who's called a regent here in New York State, and had a conversation with him about his career pathway. And just last week, he became chancellor of New York State. And so now there's a group of teachers who are like, I know the chancellor. So it's a pretty impressive way for them to be introduced to policymakers. But once again, opportunities to volunteer. So if you want to volunteer at your, a local version of the ACLU, if you want to work at local NAACP, local Urban League, but it's an opportunity to make that transition, to flex different muscles that you don't always use in the classroom. Sometimes working in classrooms can be very isolating. So being able to connect to other networks of teachers would also be helpful for you as well. And sometimes it can start as easily as a Google search, and you can go from there.
Absolutely.
And there are roles in the nonprofit world that are like the actual function of the role is very similar to teaching. Like a lot of the work that we do is facilitation, which is, if someone were applying for our programs team and they were a teacher, I'd be like, done. To have that experience would be so valuable because it's not a given that folks know those things that you just have to know as a teacher, how to hold the attention of a room, how to stay on time, how to manage different learning styles at once. Like that's so valuable. So make sure to find those pieces of whatever the role is that you could say, oh yeah, I did that in the most, high pressure situation there is, teaching whatever grade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. I mean, RISE, we do tons of sessions and we're always looking for facilitators. So we're always interested in educators that want to work in a not-for-profit space. I also think as the world, or at least the United States, is really starting to, I think, in a more open way, grapple with race and racism, there are a lot of things out there. Thinking about the student that's a psychology student, revolving around trauma and how do we address trauma in the ed space. You have a number of not-for-profits really stepping into that work, and so I think teachers and PhD students are going to become much more necessary and valuable to folks. So I think the other thing I would add is when transitioning careers, the informational interview becomes incredibly important. I think if you're letting people know you're interested in switching and just having conversations about their organization and just what you're thinking about, it's a great tool for the transition of all types. So I want to thank everybody. Those are the questions that were in the Q&A and most of the questions that I had planned to ask. And I just wanted to offer the opportunity, if there are a few words that each of you wanted to say before we sign off. Kevin can't go first. He's gotten to go first twice, and we're done. We're done with that. So Arva.
The only other words that I would have for individuals is that we need your voices. We need your energy. We need young people. There's never been any change, evolution, or revolution that we've ever had that did not feature the voices of young people. So I encourage you to step in, to lean in, and be part of this fight.
Thank you.
And similar to that, I would say when I work with students, a lot of what we talk about is how to work through imposter syndrome, or the feeling of like, I don't belong here, or they're all going to figure out that I'm not qualified. And I think everybody has those feelings, and everyone thinks they're the only one to have it. And so you're not the only one to have it. Literally everybody feels that way. And I think that's it. Just remind yourself that you deserve to be in every room that you're in, and every room that you will step in throughout your career. Even if sometimes it's scary, like Arva said, your voice is needed.
And I would say some people think about whether this is a sustainable lifestyle. Nonprofit implies lower pay, and people have to make tough choices about that. I would just say to do it, to stick with it. It is sustainable. The salaries are getting better. The salaries are often better than you think. It may be tougher in the beginning, but as you go along, it gets much better. And the pay of doing something you care about and are passionate about, and of opening up the news and saying, that is horrifying, and today I get to work on it and do something about it, as opposed to being helpless, or worse, helping the wrong team, right? That kind of compensation is incalculable. So if you've got the instinct and you try different things, you find what it is you're meant to do, don't let some of those biases about the nonprofit, salary and lifestyle and sustainability get in the way. It's great.
Wow, thank you all. I wish I had this panel, but again, we ended up where we were supposed to end up, at least at this moment, so it works out. Michael, thank you so much for having us, and I turn it back over to you.
Thank you all. I mean, this panel was phenomenal. I found myself jotting down some of the gems you dropped, being comfortable, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, interviews in soft skills and networking, showing up and showing out, benefiting from some of these affinity groups that are available. I think a lot of the things you all talked about today, we covered during the professional development portion of Big East University. So I think the fact that we were able to kind of bridge the two tracks together, I mean, just as a testament to the information that everybody's been saying is consistent, that these are the things you need to do to be successful. So thank you all for pouring into our student athletes and attendees. And I would ask the folks on the other side if you just join me in giving folks a round of emoji applause, or dropping something in the chat, some words of thanks in the chat would be helpful. Moving on, in the next day or so, we will be sending a short survey to you all to just talk about your experience tonight. Please complete that survey at your earliest convenience. Additionally, Big East University's Career Discovery program will continue tomorrow, with tomorrow's focus being careers in television broadcast. Registration information for tomorrow's panel can be found at www.bigeast.com/BigEastU. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. Be safe, stay healthy, and remember to wear your masks. See you soon.